one of my videos about Nigeria. I promise you that there aren't too many left. I'm aware that I love the sound of my own voice, but you probably don't, but stick with me. Okay, so we are nearly at the end of this Nigeria booklet, and you guys have been doing really well on this considering this is new learning. So again, just that reminder, paper 2, section B, which is called The Changing Economic World. This is all about how the economy is changing in various different countries around the world, with Nigeria being our focus. Now, question 8 looks at TransNational Corporations, or TNCs. So we're just going to have a read of this information box before we look at the question, okay? Now, you have this box in your booklet, so hopefully you read it, and this also goes hand in hand with some of the textbook pages, which it will tell you when I scroll down in a minute, okay? But basically 226 to 227 and a couple more pages will help you out there. So it says, a transnational corporation, or TNC, is a large company that operates in several countries. If you think about it, transport is taking you from one place to another. Okay, so trans means across. National means a country. Okay, and a corporation just means a large business. So it's basically saying companies that stretch across more than one country. Okay, so a TNC usually has its headquarters in an HIC in one of our high-income countries, and the production plants and the factories, so actually where the product, whatever it might be, is being made, those tend to be in the NEEs and the LICs. It says there are 40 TNCs operating in Nigeria, so that's quite a lot. This again shows that Nigeria must be considered by a lot of HICs a good place to invest. Okay, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered putting their factories and production plants in Nigeria. Now, one example is Unilever. Okay, now you might not have necessarily heard of Unilever, but if you look at probably 75% of the products in your household, whether they're food products, whether they're cleaning products, whether they're health and beauty products, they will be probably under the parent company of Unilever. So to give you an example, if you have any Dove, like skin products, you know, shower gels, face creams, things like that, anything from Dove, that is actually part of Unilever. Okay, so they are an example of a TNC, and their headquarters are in the UK and the Netherlands, but their chemical and soap manufacturing plants are in Nigeria. Now, most of the time, they're going to have the headquarters in the HICs, okay, because that's probably where the brand was started in the first place, or where that TNC was started in the first place, so it makes sense. That's where their headquarters are going to be. But then they're going to want, like, the factory floor, basically. Their factories, their big manufacturing plants where lots of stuff is going to be happening 24/7. They want those to be in the cheapest places possible. Okay, cheap in the sense of how much it costs to buy or rent the land to put the big factories on, because we're talking quite a lot of money when you're talking about several hundred acres for factories. Okay, but they also want this place to be cheap based on the amount of labour. So you don't want to go to a country where people's minimum wage is £7 or £8 and they're expecting a lot of money per hour. You're going to invest somewhere where people are quite happy to be paid maybe £1, £2 an hour, maybe even less. Okay, so somewhere like Nigeria has been the ideal place for, as we can see, 40 transnational corporations to put their manufacturing plants. So it says Unilever, they manufacture soap using Nigerian-grown palm oil. So they do use the locally grown palm oil, and that employs 1,500 people. Okay, now that might be people that are tending to the crops of the palm. That might be people harvesting the crops of the palm. That might be people transporting that harvested crop to the factories, ready for it to be processed. That might be people working in the factories, processing the palm, turning it into the soaps. That might be the people packaging up the finished product and putting it on a lorry, ready to be sent elsewhere. Okay, so lots of different jobs. It says all of the palm oil comes from sustainable sources to protect the environment, so that's a good positive thing. And the company works with people from local cultural markets to make sure the standards of employment are high and workers are cared for. So from that, we're starting to get this idea that maybe Unilever are a nice company to work for. Okay. It says the company has also promoted improvements in healthcare, education and water supply as part of its social responsibility programme in Nigeria. So Unilever, from this, clearly care about where they want to have their business, but also the people that are going to work for them. They're not just there for profit, they want to make a difference. Okay, and it says that Unilever was voted the second best company to work for in Nigeria in 2014. Okay, so if you're a Nigerian person, you want to work for Unilever. You've also got another large company that you probably have heard of called Shell. Okay, so you've probably seen their petrol stations around. Shell Oil, they also operate in Nigeria because we know oil is a big thing in Nigeria. We've looked at that previously. However, don't get me wrong, there are some positives about Shell Oil, but there are also some negatives. So these 4 points are negatives. It says oil spills have caused water pollution and damaged the land, reducing agricultural and fishing yields. That means how much fish has been caught and can be used, how many crops can actually be harvested. Toxic fumes are polluting the air. Militant groups disrupt the oil supply, and oil theft is costing the government tens of billions of dollars every year. Excuse my terrible typing in this booklet. Okay, so this suggests that there are only bad things about Shell. Okay, so I kind of haven't put all of the information here, but if you've read the textbook pages, so 226, 227, you'll know there are some positives about Shell as well. And Shell is actually the example I use in the question below. So let's scroll down and have a look. So question 8 says, assess the costs and benefits. That just means pros and cons, or positives and negatives, good things and bad things. It's just another way of saying it. So assess the costs and benefits of TNCs in Nigeria. 6 marks. Now, got the textbook pages there. You could either write about Shell or you could write about Unilever. You could write about both if you want, but for a 6-mark question, you might not get enough information in there trying to write about them both. So it's probably best to pick one. I've personally gone for Shell because I'm more confident with that one. I know more information about it. So I had written a pretty bad example for that question. Here's my original one that I wrote. The benefits of a TNC are that they give people a job, put money into the country for stuff like roads. Also, other companies start to make money. Problems are that local people are poorly paid, working conditions can be poor like a sweatshop, the big jobs go to people from foreign countries like the one where the head office is. Overall, I think there are good and bad things about TNCs in Nigeria. Now don't get me wrong, everything in that is correct, but as you can see, it would only achieve 2 marks out of the 6 that are available. So there's nothing wrong with this answer, but it doesn't have enough detail and enough evidence to back up those points to achieve those further 4 marks. So it's a good starting point. Excuse me. So as you can see, I have said that our keyword here, our command word is assess. So we're basically saying what's good and what's bad about it, and I've put that in blue. So in this question, they have kind of tried to put a bit of an assessment down at the end. I think there are good and bad things about TNCs in Nigeria, but they haven't given me much more than that. Okay, they've also used words like stuff. We don't like words like stuff. The true word for, if we're talking about roads, railway lines, telephone cables, things like that, we're talking about infrastructure. Okay, so we're making sure we're using that geographical terminology. Okay, and also the big jobs. What do you mean by a big job? Okay, is a big job something that gets paid lots of money, or it takes a long time to do it? What does that mean? That's not a good way to describe the jobs. What they should say is something like the important jobs, or the more highly paid jobs, or the most important jobs, something like that. But big jobs, not good enough, and go to people from foreign countries like the one where the head office is. There's no example, so I don't know what we're talking about here. Okay, this is a very generic answer. They need more evidence. They need to use a case study, whether that's Unilever or Shell, to back up their points. Okay, so it's just a bit bare. That's what this answer is, just a bit bare at the moment. So your job was then to try and improve and develop that answer further. Now, you could have completely rewritten it and used different points. That's absolutely fine. I have rewritten it quite a lot, but I've also sort of stuck with these 2 paragraphs. So just to remind ourselves of the question, assess the costs and benefits, pros and cons, of TNCs in Nigeria. What are the good things? What are the bad things? Now, as it's a 6-mark question, you don't need an introduction or a conclusion. I have done it for mine, but technically you don't need one. If you're quite happy to do them and you can do them quickly and concisely, go for it. But if you think trying to do an introduction and a conclusion is going to waste your time, then don't worry about them. What's more important is that you need 2 peel paragraphs. Okay, now you could get away with 2 P paragraphs, so point, evidence, explain, or I know some of you use C and seed from English. They're basically the same thing. Okay, but I have done peel this time to make sure I'm definitely getting those marks. So let's have a look. Here's my introduction. There are many costs, cons, and benefits, pros, to TNCs working in Nigeria. So I've assessed it straight away. In that first sentence, I'm saying, yeah, there are a lot of pros and cons. That's absolutely fine. And I've put, it depends on the transnational corporation as to how positive or negative they are in helping Nigeria, because it does. Because as we've seen from above, Unilever is pretty positive. Shell seems a bit more negative. In the case of Shell Oil, there you go, I've told you straight away in my second sentence what my example is going to be. They are not the perfect company. Okay, so I'm kind of alluding to the idea that actually Shell aren't that great. Yeah, there's going to be some good things, but there's also some cons. So you don't need an introduction. I could have completely got rid of this section, okay, but I've put that in there just because I wanted to. Don't have to have it. But as you can see, I've clearly got my Peel paragraph here. Okay, so point, evidence, explain, link. Now, I would like to point out that your evidence and your explanation can swap around. They don't always have to be in this order. Okay, and you'll see that in my next paragraph, I have actually swapped them around. As long as you've got them there, it doesn't matter which way round they go. If you prefer seed paragraph, this is your statement, evidence, explain, and then develop. Okay, literally the exact same structure, I just use different words to English. If you prefer C and seed, that's fine. So, my point. Firstly, there are some benefits of transnational corporations like Shell Oil working in Nigeria. So I am going to say some of the good things. It's asked me to look at pros and cons, so I've decided to start off with the pros. I can tick that off then. I've also made sure to name my example again, to make it very obvious, look, this is the example I'm talking about, I know what I'm talking about. So for example, the oil company has provided many jobs for the local people. Brilliant, that's my first point. That is already backing up why Shell are a good company. But now I need a bit of evidence to back that up, so this next bit is my evidence. Shell has created 65,000 direct jobs to Nigerians, as well as a further 250,000 jobs in related industries. So they might not be working directly for Shell, but it might be another company that maybe makes the barrels that then get sold to Shell to put the oil in, something like that. Okay, that's my evidence. Putting those numbers in as soon as you've got facts, figures, numbers, dates, ages, times, names, whatever it might be, that's your evidence. I could leave it there. But the thing is, to make sure I'm getting those full marks, I need to actually explain what that means. Why is that a good thing? Why is that number of jobs being created such a positive thing? So this is my explanation. This means that 315,000 jobs were created in Nigeria because of Shell Oil. This allows people to earn a guaranteed wage and therefore improve their family's quality of life. Simple as that. If I'm earning money, I can afford to put food on the table. I can afford to pay my bills. I can afford to buy a bike for my family or get the bus rather than having to walk everywhere. Okay, and that's going to improve my quality of life. So I've explained it. And then my final point is my link or my development. Okay, and I've kind of explained a little bit further in that as well. But what this is doing is summing up my paragraph and saying why this is a benefit, why this is a positive thing. So these employees will also pay taxes, which will go back into the Nigerian economy, in turn improving the country as a whole, as roads, transport and other infrastructure improvements are more affordable. Straight away, that paragraph sums it up really nicely. You can see how I have improved on this one, because I'm talking about the fact that people get a job, that money goes back into the country and it can improve stuff like roads. I've said that, I've said all of those things, but I've used evidence to back it up, and I've also used proper geographical terminology, proper geographical keywords, okay, and vocabulary, like infrastructure, transport, okay? And I haven't said things like they get better, I've said they've improved, okay? So it's all about using those synonyms that just basically sound a bit better. So that's my first point. So I've said benefits, tick, I can tick that off. I also know I'm definitely talking about TNCs because I've spoken about Shell, and I'm talking about Nigeria, so the only thing I've really got to do is repeat the same thing but for the negatives. So my second paragraph is my Peel paragraph again, and it's my negatives. But just to point out, this is actually my explanation, this is my evidence. So they've swapped around for this one, but that doesn't matter. So my point, or my statement. However, as a TNC works in several countries, the important buildings like headquarters with the high-paid jobs remain in the HICs where money flow and unemployment generally aren't issues, and the low-paid, less skilled, less safe work is placed in the LIC/NEEs, this is a cost, this is a negative. So again, I could finish that there and say, this is a bad thing. You know, the less safe jobs, the less skilled jobs, the lower paid jobs are put in the NEEs, full stop. But I'm not going to. I'm now going to carry on and I'm going to explain what that means. This means that most of the profit generated ends up going abroad and returning back to the HICs rather than staying in the LICs or NEEs like Nigeria that need it. Okay, so the money that's being made isn't just going into the pocket of the people. Okay, and let's be honest, the majority of the people are going to be working in the factories. There's going to be less people working in headquarters, yet the few people working in headquarters are going to be getting most of the money. So, and again, I'm now going to use some evidence to back up my point. So Shell Oil, straight away, throwing that name in there, showing I know my case studies. Shell Oil is a good example of this. Its headquarters and therefore highest paid staff are based in the Netherlands in Europe, meaning most of the money is leaving Nigeria and only a small amount is staying in the hands of the local workers. Okay, I'm now going to finish off this paragraph, link it back to the question, say whether this is a good or a bad thing, and develop that point finally. This is going to slow the economic and general development of Nigeria as they move towards becoming an HIC, and therefore Shell almost control the rate at which Nigeria can develop. Okay? Like I said, I could finish it there. That could be it. That would be my 6 marks, done and dusted. But I added a little conclusion just to summarise it because I wasn't quite happy with my ending there. So although money is going into the Nigerian economy and jobs have been created, it is not a perfect situation and the company itself still gets the best from the situation. So I've just summed it up. I've basically said, yeah, there's good things. Yeah, jobs have been made, but actually there are still bad things. And the already rich people are just making more money and the poorer people aren't getting as much money as they could be. So I've just summed it up quite nicely. Okay, what I would now do is first of all, I would note how much longer my answer is, my improved one, compared to this one. If we're talking 6 marks, you are talking about a side of A4. Okay, we're not talking about basically 4 sentences. That is not enough. I have written a side of A4 there. Okay, if it was handwritten, typed, it's about half a side of A4. So you are talking about a fair bit of writing. But if you know your case studies, if you've revised your case studies, you know the information, that will flow incredibly quickly in your exam. And it's something that over time, with practice, you'll just get quicker and quicker at doing. So I would now check your own work, go through. Do you think your improvement is enough? Have you written enough? Have you included enough evidence? Have you included a case study of Shell or Unilever? Have you actually looked at the information on the textbook pages? Okay, or have you just kind of rewritten a bare bones answer? Look at the bare bones, look at mine. There is a lot more in my one. Can you now improve your answer still to get those 6 marks?